All right, so I really don't want this to be a sad topic, but uh, it probably will be. But I want to talk about how to process grief. So I had emailed the oils that I'm going to talk about, and I don't know if you had a chance to get that email, but if you don't have them in front of you, that's okay. If you have other oils in front of you, that's great. Whatever tools you need, certainly have them. So, we all grieve in different ways. We go through different stages in different timelines in reaction to a loss that we've had. You know, mourning is the outward expression of a loss, and grief is the internal expression of that loss. And so as I go through, because I've expanded the grief stages, and I'm going to tell you about this protocol that I've been working with for over 2 years, I have learned that you can go back and forth between the stages. What is really important, especially with the energetic work that I do, is that you don't linger in grief. You can't rush the grieving process. You need to let it unfold, but you can't linger in it. You will know if you're lingering in it if your life is stuck. And prolonged grief will settle into the body and eventually create physical disease. So it is really important to learn various ways that you can process grief. And so I'm just going to talk about essential oils in processing grief. And there are a lot of different ways to process grief. But I want to talk about just this one way in hopes that it can help. I mean, if it can help somebody, I'm going to be super happy about that. And so when we look at grief and where it can come from the loss of a loved one, whether it's a person or a pet. And that loss can be death. That loss can be through mental illness or dementia, where they're physically still there, but who you knew them as is gone. It can be loss of a loved one, a child moves away to college, or moves to another country, or moves to another state, or just moves out. That can be a loss. It can be loss of pregnancy, loss of a child, loss of health. We're in a pandemic, so loss of health can be a big one for people. Loss of a job, whether you were terminated or whether you resigned or whether you retired, it's still a loss. Loss of relationships. We are living, unfortunately, in a very divisive world that, at least energetically, I don't see resolving anytime soon. And so there's been loss of relationships. And the loss of a relationship could have nothing to do with divisiveness. It just could be the end of a marriage, the end of a romantic relationship, the end of a friendship, the end of a business relationship. It can be the loss of a home. Even if you are intentionally moving from one home to another, we can become attached to our homes. And so the loss of that home, there can be grief. Just simply moving to a new location. Whether you want to move, you have to move, whatever the reason, you can grieve that. And then it can even be loss of a lifestyle. And we've seen that in the last 18 months, where the lifestyle that we all used to have is gone. The way that we lived is gone because of the pandemic. And whether whether we're going to return to that or not, we still can grieve that loss of a lifestyle, the loss of the time that we've had, the losses that have happened in isolation, the loss of social connections. So there's just all different mechanisms in our life where we can experience loss. And your physical and emotional health before grief happens can actually determine how long your grief process is. So if you are not in good health, you will typically grieve longer than somebody who is in good health and vital and has good energy. If you emotionally were not in a good place before the grief started, your grieving process will be longer. So this is why I'm always banging the drum about using your oils for body, mind, and spirit, because you just never know what's around the corner. So when someone encounters prolonged grief, this is grief. And again, everybody grieves differently. There is no time frame where anybody should say to you, you need to move on. That's not anybody's call. But prolonged grief is when you are stuck in a stage. You are stuck in that grief and you know it. You know that you are, and you don't necessarily know how to get yourself out of it. What happens when you are stuck in prolonged grief? Depression can set in, because depression is a byproduct of anger, and anger is one of the stages. Anxiety can set in, which directly relates to depression. PTSD can occur. Guilt, survivor's guilt for continuing on with your life when another person's life or a pet's life has ended, or they've moved on. Maybe you moved on and you feel guilty about that. It can result in isolation, in eating disorders, where either you're not eating or you're engaging in addictive food behavior. There can be concentration problems where you just can't focus, because grief can be all-consuming. It can result in addictions, all sorts of addictions. It will lower your energy. You're just fatigued. You're sleeping more. And it can even lead to heart attacks. I mean, I actually personally know of a situation, gosh, this probably happened 25 years ago, where a daughter, an adult daughter, was actually killed by a sniper. It's still an unsolved mystery here in the Lansing area. You may know what I'm talking about. And when the police went to the door of her parents, the mother in that moment suffered a massive heart attack and literally died in that moment when she was told that her daughter had been killed by a sniper. So that sort of stuff is real, and it can happen. That was more of an instantaneous situation, but prolonged grief will actually wear and tear physically on your heart. So I want to go through this essential oil protocol that I created. I created it in July of 2019. So this was pre-pandemic. And I created it because I had so many friends who in particular were losing their pets unexpectedly. Their pets were passing on. And I mean, this was even before my mom had her situation happen in December of 2019, where ever since then, she's been in assisted living, non-mobile, with late stage dementia that just doesn't seem to have an end in sight. So it's interesting that I created this protocol. I've always found that just when I trust my intuition and I create something or I do something, there is always a purpose. And so I'm glad I created this protocol. I tested it with a couple of people. I've tested it on myself. And so it's very relevant. And I've really been sitting on this and decided, you know, hey, I think I'm going to launch it with all of you, and please test it out and give me feedback, because I would actually like to take this more public. You know, so it's very relevant right now in a pandemic where there is all sorts of grief across the board. You know, I had a conversation with somebody today who lost somebody to COVID. And yesterday I had a conversation with somebody who inadvertently exposed a high-risk person to COVID. And that person who inadvertently, accidentally had no idea that they were carrying COVID, they're already grieving. They're grieving that exposure and they're terrified for this other person. So there's just so many situations that are happening in our world. This protocol actually will meet people where they are, no matter what stage in the grief process they're at. And it provides the opportunity to, you know, if you regress back in one of the grief stages, you got the oils. You can just go back to those oils. So, you know, there's just so many different ways that people process grief, and this is just one way that may help. It certainly is not going to hurt. And while there are many oils that can help with grief, my object was to keep this simple and doable. So I'm just going to be talking about, I'm going to go through 7 stages. Most people talk about the 5 stages of grief. I've expanded it and I've gone to 7 stages. I'm going to be sharing 1 single oil and 1 blend per stage. The single oil is meant for inhalation, and the blended oil is meant to be used topically. Now, you may find other oils that help in your particular situation, so trust if you are drawn to a certain oil. Trust that. And like I said, I mean, there are a lot of grief support oils. These may be oils that you have never worked with before. And, you know, the goal is to get to the point in grieving where you accept the loss, you no longer feel the physical or emotional pain, you've adjusted, you've moved on, and you're living your life, because grief freezes you in your footsteps from living your life. Now, one thing that would be helpful with these oils to see, you know, because everybody has a different energy and frequency, and you may not be sure what stage you're at, but you can body test the oils before use. Now, what do I mean by that? What you do is you just hold the oil. You can hold it in a hand right in front of your heart. You're going to stand and make sure that your feet are hip width apart, and just stand straight up. Don't lean your head forward. Be straight up. And if your body starts to slowly lean forward, you are leaning into that oil and it's beneficial for you. If your body stands still or slightly leans back, then that is not the right oil for you. That's a real simple muscle test that you can do with the oils. And then you can also add in affirmations or tapping. If you're familiar with the emotional freedom technique, you know, the tapping protocol. If you want to learn more about tapping, Brad Yates on YouTube is my tapping guy. He's amazing, and you can learn a lot from him. He has a lot of tapping videos on grief, and you can tap with the oils. All right, so, all right, let's go to the first stage. And I call this the anticipatory stage. This is, you know, before whatever is going to happen, it's before it happens. So, you know, it can be the anguish that happens for the terminally ill who linger, you know, which allows you the opportunity to say goodbye, but lingering can go on for years and can create a lot of uncertainty in life. I have this happening with my mom. She's not my mom and hasn't been for 18 months. but she's still there in body. That is anticipatory grief because she's not gone. And so you feel like your life is on hold because you're either waiting for somebody to die or you're waiting for a situation to change, like waiting for a job to come back, waiting for a relationship to come back, waiting for health to return. And so it puts you in a holding pattern, which is not good because then your life is stuck. And it's stuck in a holding pattern of grief and stagnation. So it's like you're just treading water in the energy of grief. You're not swimming out of it at all. You're just treading water and you can't get out of it. So these oils that I'm going to talk about can help when a person or a pet is in hospice, when a person has dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or Lou Gehrig's. And I mean, they can live for years with that. Or you're waiting for a diagnosis. Like the tests have been done and your mind is already going crazy, anticipating the possibilities. Or when you're clinging to a relationship or a job or a situation and hoping it will change, you're still in anticipatory grief. So the oils are sandalwood. Now, Young Living has 2 sandalwoods. We have sacred sandalwood from Australia. We have Royal Hawaiian sandalwood from Hawaii. It doesn't matter, okay? Either sandalwood. What you want to do is smell it. You can smell it right from the bottle, or you can put a drop in your hand and smell it, or you can diffuse it. Here's what sandalwood does. Sandalwood is for the fear that we have for being present at the end of life. So if you're going to be there in the final moments of life for a person or a pet, you want this oil with you. It helps with excessive worry and over-attachment to the death process. So like going into obsessive compulsive activity to just keep busy so that you can avoid addressing what is inevitably going to happen. It helps you accept reality as it is so that you can actually move on and continue to live your life while this long-term grieving process is going on. It is cooling and calming to our energy system and our nervous system. So when those, emotions bubble up and maybe you go into the anger phase, this is cooling and it's calming to the nervous system. And it helps to create a higher state of consciousness for understanding what's going on, to help us accept reality as it is. And it allows you to be in the here and now to support the person or the pet while you keep living. Okay, that's what sandalwood does. Now, Valor, you're going to want to topically apply it to the back of your shoulders, across your shoulder blade, and along your lower spine. Go as high up as you can. You want to go up and down the spine. And this, you can also smell it, but this offers calm and courage to be present before and during the death process for our loved ones, to be present before and during the breakdown of a relationship, the breakdown of health, having to move, all the things that we can grieve that I talked about. It's being present before that and during it. And to stop the busyness, to keep us out of that energy, but to also prevent us from getting stuck in it. So you can use affirmations with this, and a good affirmation for anticipatory grief is, the best way to honor this situation is to live my life fully. So this is a grief stage that sadly I know all too well because of my mom. And this is what I've had to do, because the first 4 months of her situation where we were told literally that she had days to live, well, we are now almost 2 years later, and she's had 3 death situations, including one in August, and she still keeps going. And so I just could not go to a WASO 4 or 5 times a week and spend the whole day. And I decided, you know, the best way that I can honor my mom is to actually live my life. So that is a really powerful affirmation, and it does work. All right, second stage is denial, being in shock, you know, disbelief. So the instinctive reaction that comes from a shocking or a traumatic news is that we deny it instantly. We deny it. That is just an instinct. And we don't want to face what's happening. So what happens is decisions can't get made. And the shock and the disbelief can result in numbness. It can result in freeze behavior. So we have the fight, flight, or freeze mechanisms in us, and shock and trauma can result in freezing. And I've actually had this happen when I had a traumatic situation with my cat Jacob, where he literally crashed and was in the process of dying. It was totally unexpected. And the veterinarians were trying to explain options to me. And I actually said to them, I am in shock right now. I am frozen. I can't make decisions. I need you to talk to me like I'm a kindergartner. I literally cannot understand the words coming out of your mouth. That I at least had enough knowledge of what shock does to the body that I could explain that to them. But that's what happens. But it can also result in numbness, where you go blank. You go blank, and it's detaching from the situation. And so these oils will help start the process to get the grieving going. Because even if everything turns out okay, in that moment, what happened needs to grieve. And the grieving process needs to start. Otherwise, you are frozen in that energy. So how you get that going? Cypress. Smell cypress. So when grief has not been dealt with, and you are frozen, you don't even have the ability to grieve, to weep. Cypress is going to help with flow and to get you unstuck. It helps to let go of the past. You know, it helps you let go of regrets of what you did or regrets of what you didn't do. It helps you to accept this difficult change that was thrust upon you. It helps to dissolve remorse. And it's comforting in the bereavement process because it helps you find a new direction in life. White Angelica goes, again, across the shoulders and also on the stomach. The stomach is our solar plexus. That's our power center. And when we have shock or trauma, it immediately goes into that solar plexus. Boom. And we even will say, I feel like I was punched in the gut, or I am sick to my stomach. That's where the energy goes. So you put the White Angelica there, because this is a blend of oils for protection, for feeling emotionally safe, so that you can move out of the shock and the denial, so that you can start making decisions. And it gives comfort as you start the grieving process. So it helps you begin that transformation back to self while feeling very angelically protected and safe, and allowing the feelings to flow rather than getting stuck or frozen in that shock and disbelief energy. So a good affirmation is, I am safe and I can handle the truth. I am safe and I can handle the truth. It gives you strength and it is protective. I always envision White Angelica as Archangel Michael taking his big old wings and just wrapping them around. That's what White Angelica is. All right, anger. All right, this is the next stage. And we can become angry at whoever we feel is responsible for this situation that you're now grieving. So it can be a medical professional that may or may not have been responsible, maybe gave a wrong diagnosis. You know, I got to tell you, I was pretty angry at the doctors who told my dad and I don't leave the hospital. Your mom literally has like a day or two left. And it's like, what? She just fell. Like, what the heck is going on? But we literally stayed at the hospital the whole time. And then I got really angry because she came out of it. And it's like, I'm sorry, you just traumatized us and had us grieve, put us in anticipatory grief for no reason. So anger can happen at any time. You know, it can be anger at somebody who may be hurt or killed, a person or a pet that you love. You could be angry at the pandemic. You could be angry at the government. You can be angry at the person who's dying. You can be angry at yourself for being angry. It's anger for not having control to correct the situation and make it right. That's what anger is. It's lack of control. So these are the oils that you're going to use when you need to release anger so that you can actually be present with the situation, with the person, and start the grief process and let it continue moving through your energy. So neroli is a great oil to have. This one you want to smell. Oh, that's divine. And you're going to use it for unexpressed anger, for agitated emotions, for restlessness, and it releases repressed emotions before they turn inward and create physical disease. Because disease is dis-ease. It is lack of ease in the body, and anger will eat you up with poison from the inside out. So neroli is really good for this. It brings relief from emotional exhaustion from the grief process, especially if you have lingering grief. You've got that anticipatory grief with somebody who is just lingering and terminally ill, or a relationship that just lingers and just won't end, or a job, or any scenario that just lingers around. And it helps with very, very deep, whoa, what is that flying by my house? Hold on. I have no idea what that was. That was super loud and close. Sorry about that. It helps to release very deep emotional pain. Neroli is amazing for this. It lowers your blood pressure to help you not be angry, and it helps to release the anger when you can't see straight, when you're so angry, you're not even rational. That doesn't do anything to help the situation. Now, the release oil, you're going to want to topically apply it over your liver, which is on the right side of your body, kind of on your rib cage, or where you feel the anger in your body. And you use this to release anger at a cellular level so that it doesn't embed in the body and create a problem, because anger goes to the liver. So whenever I encounter people that are having liver issues, I just ask them, what are you angry with? And it's usually an explosion of words that come out. So this is why you use release on the liver, so that you can move forward in your life without negative emotions tied to the death of your loved one, or tied to the loss of a job, a situation. You need to be able to move on and not have that negative lingering. And a great affirmation is, I am present and I am peaceful. All right, the next phase is bargaining. And this is a control mechanism when we feel that if we did something, we could stop this from happening. If we stopped doing something, we could stop this from happening. If we negotiate effectively with God, then we can change the results. So that's what bargaining is. It's a control mechanism. And this is a stage of helplessness being countered with overactivity to try to change a result. And so when that happens, when you're in that bargaining phase, you want to use these oils when you feel out of control. So orange, you want to smell it. So this is a good one to smell when you're trying so hard to prevent a loss. You're trying to save a person, save a pet. You know, it could be a child with mental illness that is spinning out of control. It could be a pet that, you know, got into an accident and, you know, you're just praying that they come through. Or you actually have a loved one that just got a diagnosis and you start bargaining. You know, hey, I'll do whatever it takes to save my child, my parent, my sibling, my best friend, my pet. And it helps those who are problem solvers and perfectionists, because we will tend to blame ourselves. Like, we could have done more. Like, I should have known how to stop this. I should have called one more doctor. I should have intervened. I knew I should have, and I didn't, and I should have intervened. Okay, don't should on yourself. That's the orange oil is going to get you out of that and help with those feelings of overwhelm and the overburdened mind when we're trying to bargain to stop a runaway train. Because no matter what your belief system is, everyone has a purpose at a soul level, and sometimes that purpose is they're here for a certain amount of time. And when that purpose is over, they go on to the next stage. So they're just physically not here anymore, but they're off doing something else because that's what their soul, that's what they've agreed to. And so we can try to bargain all we want, but at a soul level, this is a done deal and it's hard. Orange can help with that. Now the 3 wise men blend. Ooh, this is a good one. This is frankincense, myrrh, spruce, and sandalwood. Ooh, it is a good one. And in this blend, it's going to assist with the grieving process when you topically apply it on the crown, on the top of your head. Because what it does is it opens up your communication center to your higher self, your higher power, whoever your creator is. Because when you can have that communication, it gives you peace. And it stills the mind. It gives you peace. It calms the nervous system so that you can accept what is unfolding, realize that you are not, you know, a superhero that can change this outcome. And so it allows you to be there, to be present in this situation when it comes to moving through sorrow and grief. And so a good affirmation is, I have faith in the final result. I have faith in the final result. All right, next stage, depression or guilt. So having feelings of regret about what happened, about, oh, I didn't make amends, I didn't have time, or I was too angry and I didn't make amends, or I could have corrected the situation. I could have apologized to, you know, my boss. I could have apologized to my friend. I could have. It's all the could haves. And when you're so focused on what was left undone, it leads to depression. Depression over the noticeable empty space that's created by the loss that you're grieving. And depression is really unresolved anger. When anger is allowed to sit in the liver, it's going to result in depression. And so the oil you want to work with is frankincense. So this is actually probably one of the primary grief oils, because grief settles in the lungs. So when you smell this, it will deepen the breath of your lungs and stop the grief from really settling in. You know, it'll just start to loosen it, because grief, I always envision it, it has these claws and it does this to your lungs. And it doesn't want to let go. Frankincense, when you smell it, does this to grief. And then it can rise and float out. So it calms and it centers the mind and it clarifies your thoughts when it's stilling the mind. And it gives you this inner stillness, this inner calmness to stop the anger from turning into depression, from turning into survivor's guilt. Like, why did this person have to leave? You know, why wasn't I taken instead? Survivor's guilt can even be in the workplace. I experienced this when a company I worked for, they laid off half the staff. I survived it and I had horrible survivor's guilt. It was horrible. So there are many situations where guilt and depression can happen, and this is absolutely a stage that you will go through in the grieving process. So a good affirmation is, the pain in my heart is healing every day. All right, let's go to acceptance. All right, we're moving through the process here. So here's the thing, depending on what the grief is, you may always be grieving, but at some point you will come to terms with it and realize that you have a life that needs to go on. And so you accept it. You don't have to like it, but you accept it. And you know when you get to this phase. And by moving through all the other phases, you can get to this phase faster and not get frozen in one of the previous stages. So the oil that you want to smell is pine. Now, what I love about Young Living is we have all of these farms with pine trees. So we have like just the regular pine. I mean, it literally just says pine. But we also have, this came out last year during, was it last year or this year during convention? I don't remember, but it's called Northern Lights Lodgepole Pine. And it was in the Northern Lights collection. I can't remember if it was for the holiday season last year or convention this year. That's another thing that grief does to the brain, is you have memory loss. So either of these are pine. Pine is amazing. And you smell it to ease regret and remorse, and to revitalize the energy in your lungs, to get that grief from latching onto your lungs and allowing it to release. It also works on your kidneys where you store fear. It helps to disperse melancholy. It'll fortify you psychologically because it replaces remorse and guilt with forgiveness and self-acceptance. Little old pine does all that. Oh, that's delicious. Woo! And it is tart. That is powerful. And then the blend that you want to topically apply on your stomach, which is your power center, is, you know, for when you are in transition to accept a new way of life because of the loss that you experienced. It helps you to let go of trying to control the situation. It helps you to let go of all of those prior stages and to accept what happened so that you can move on, because you're still here. You're still here for a reason. So apply acceptance over your stomach. I also like smelling it. And the affirmation I like to use is, I am strong and courageous in embracing my new life, because it takes strength and it takes courage. And then the last stage is finding happiness, like really moving on. And moving on can actually pop you back 2 phases to guilt, where you feel guilty. This is where survivor's guilt can blend over into this stage. But it's important to find happiness again, because life is about happiness. If you don't have happiness, then it's really important to reevaluate your days, because we're not meant to be miserable. We're not meant to be in pain at all. And no one ever expects us to be sad and depressed and angry and guilt-ridden and grief-stricken the rest of our lives. Nobody would ever want that. Whether it's the loss of a family member, the loss of a pet, the breakup of a relationship, a boss who was horrible to you. None of those people would want you to live in misery at all. you deserve to be happy, and they want that for you. So when you're ready to move on and reclaim your life and live it again, Palmarosa, which is really an uncelebrated oil. It is amazing. I love Palmarosa. So you're going to want to smell this because it's going to stabilize the energy in your heart and your nervous system and just kind of reset you back to square one, because it encourages the flow of energy back into your life. It's really good for people who feel nervous and insecure about moving forward without their loved one, or without the job or the home or the location, whatever the grief is. And it allows you to be able to let go and accept change, to allow yourself to be happy, even in the absence of what you lost. That's what Palmarosa does. Palmarosa is an amazing oil, has so many benefits. And then the blend to topically apply over your heart is joy. And joy, you use this to give yourself permission to feel joy and happiness again. Here's the thing, I don't know if you've been listening to the words that I've been saying, but I've been using words like allowing yourself, giving yourself permission, because you have a choice. No matter what has happened, life does not control you. You are in control of your life. That can be really hard to feel when you're grieving. That's why these oils are powerful, because you make choices. The choices that you make will depend on how you feel. And so joy is, you are giving yourself permission. You're saying it's okay. And it's the right thing for you to be joyful and happy again. I mean, it's got floral and citrus oils in it that really energetically and emotionally lift you up, pull you out of the grief and the sorrow, which are blocks to you feeling love and happiness and joy. Okay, so the affirmation is, I deserve to be happy. No one on this planet should ever be condemned to grief and sadness and melancholy and depression and guilt and anger. No one, I don't care who they are, no one should ever be condemned to that. Don't condemn yourself to it. Because what you lost, whether it's a person, a pet, or a situation, they would not want that for you. So it's okay, you deserve to be happy. So it's healthy to grieve, it's healthy to move on, and it's healthy to be happy. And your loved ones would want that. So I hope, you may go back and forth between these stages, like I said, but eventually you should progress to the final stage. And when you get there, you won't go backwards. You can actually hear somebody talk about the person, the pet, or the situation, and it actually brings a smile to your face. That's when you know you've made it through the grieving process, when you can think back with fond memories, not the negative part, but the fond part of it. You know you've gotten there. All right, so that is the end of the presentation. I am going to stop the recording and see if any of you have any questions.